Here's why the U.S. integrated combat network stands apart. It does not wait for a formal announcement or a slow political signal. It starts long before the other side fully understands what is happening. Deep underground, before a single Iranian radar operator can make sense of a compromised screen, the first decisive moment is already unfolding. At 1:03 a.m., not in Syria but inside Iran. In the heavily fortified centrifuge halls, once considered unreachable, a 30,000-pound hardened penetrator moving close to 800 miles per hour cuts down from the night sky and drives straight into the granite above the facility. This is the GBU-57 Massive Ordnance Penetrator, released by a B-21 Raider cruising at 55,000 feet. It is not just a bomb, it is a statement from the U.S. Air Force, worth roughly $3.5 million, designed to do one thing with terrifying precision. It does not burst on impact. First, it uses pure momentum to punch through around 200 feet of reinforced concrete and rock. Only after reaching deep inside the target does its delayed fuse trigger the detonation. The effect is like a contained earthquake, collapsing Iran's main nuclear enrichment site into a buried maze of shattered stone and pulverized machinery. And while debris is still settling underground, the most remarkable phase of the operation begins. The B-21 does not simply leave the area. It remains on station. Using its powerful active electronically scanned array radar, it immediately shifts into a role known as digital mapping and battlefield erasure. Within 6 minutes of the strike, it has located every active IRGC surface-to-air missile site within a 200-mile radius and pushed those coordinates through hardened satellite links straight into the cockpits of 4 F-35C Lightning IIs circling over the Persian Gulf. This is what makes the system so formidable. The U.S. does not just hit one target. It starts dismantling an entire defensive architecture almost instantly, compressing what used to take hours into the time it takes to brew a pot of coffee. By 2:15 a.m., Iran reacts out of urgency. The B-21 is still invisible to them, so they turn toward the most visible symbol of U.S. power in the region, the USS Gerald R. Ford Carrier Strike Group. Calling the strike an act of piracy, the IRGC Navy launches a large-scale swarm operation. 65 fast attack craft, including high-speed Zulfiqar-class boats, surge out from coastal positions near Bandar Abbas. They race across the water at more than 55 miles per hour, weaving unpredictably in an effort to overload targeting solutions. At the same time, multiple surface-launched anti-ship missiles rise from hidden launch sites along the coast. Then comes the saturation volley. 40 Noor anti-ship cruise missiles, Iran's version of the C-802, roar into the night from mobile launchers hidden in the hills. Flying just 15 feet above the waves at roughly 650 miles per hour, they skim the sea and rush toward the carrier group. Iran's commanders understand they may lose a large number of platforms. They only need one missile to get through and land on the Ford's deck to claim a symbolic success. The swarm closes recklessly, crossing in front of escorting destroyers and forcing the U.S. ships into a more defensive posture. For a brief moment, the pressure is real. The Iranian approach is brutal, but it is also clever. While the fast boats draw attention, they introduce a new electronic warfare drone, the Cyborg EW. Suddenly, the Ford's cooperative engagement capability begins to flicker. Iran has found a narrow harmonic weakness in the ship's sensor handoff. For 120 tense seconds, the USS Gerald R. Ford is only partially seeing the battle around it. The destroyers can still detect the incoming missiles, but the data they pass to the carrier is being distorted by the electronic interference. Inside the Combat Information Center, the Spy-6 radar begins showing ghost tracks. The Tactical Action Officer watches 14 Noor missiles closing fast, 15 miles out, 82 seconds to impact. Now the carrier has to depend on point defense. The RIM-162 Evolved Sea Sparrow launchers come alive. These $1.8 million interceptors are the ship's shield, firing in rapid sequence, 4 missiles every 2 seconds. Capable of brutal 50G turns, they streak into the night and lock onto the incoming threats. One by one, 12 of the Noor missiles are destroyed in bright mid-air flashes. But Iran is not finished. While attention stays fixed on the missile defense fight, the Wolfpack boats reach the inner engagement zone. At 2:40 a.m., as the Ford begins a hard starboard turn to bring its close-in weapons to bear, sonar reports something worse. Multiple smart mines, active directly in the carrier's projected path. These are not old drifting naval mines. They are Sadafo-2 acoustic-moored smart mines, guided by onboard processors and tuned to listen for the exact cavitation pattern created by the Ford's 4 massive propellers. Suddenly, the carrier is boxed in. Continue the turn and it risks entering the minefield. Stop and it becomes a slower, easier target for the remaining fast attack craft armed with anti-ship missiles. From the Iranian side, it looks like checkmate. But that confidence disappears almost immediately. High above, the B-21 Raider has been monitoring the IRGC's internal radio frequency triggers used to manage the minefield. This is where the US system begins to look almost unreal. The B-21 is not only a stealth bomber, it functions as a high-altitude cyber and electronic warfare hub. It identifies the digital handshake between Coastal Command and the mines. In under 15 milliseconds, its mission systems break into the encrypted Iranian network, and it does not simply shut the mines down, it changes them. Sensors now show the mines breaking from their moorings and shifting position. Through a forged acoustic command delivered by a nearby US Navy unmanned underwater vehicle, the mines are told the primary target has moved. What Iran expected to be the perfect trap suddenly starts tracking the IRGC fast attack craft, charging in for the final blow. Seconds later, the water erupts. 6 underwater blasts, each equivalent to roughly 500 pounds of TNT, obliterate the lead Iranian interceptors. The shockwaves are so severe that nearby fiberglass hulls crack apart almost instantly. In a moment, the carefully prepared mine barrier turns into a disaster for the very force that laid it. With the mine threat neutralized and the jamming source pinpointed by the B-21, the Ford regains full battlefield awareness. The response is immediate. Weapons are cleared, batteries go free. One of the escorting Arleigh Burke-class destroyers, USS Winston S. Churchill, unleashes a volley of RIM-174 Standard Missile 6 interceptors. At around $4.3 million each, the SM-6 is more than just a defensive round. It carries its own active seeker and hunts targets independently. These missiles rip across the Gulf at 2,600 miles per hour, striking not only fast-moving boats, but also the coastal launchers that fired the cruise missiles in the first place. At the same time, 2 F/A-18E Super Hornets, fed targeting data directly from the B-21, release AGM-158CLR ASM missiles. These are stealthy, autonomous, smart anti-ship weapons designed to think their way through confusion. They do not need constant human steering. They sort through false targets, burning wreckage, and decoys, identify the real command nodes, and select the exact center of the Iranian control structure. 4 impacts. 4 command boats disappear. To close the fight for good, the Churchill launches BGM-109 Tomahawk land attack missiles toward the coastal bunkers that staged the Wolfpack. Flying low and hugging terrain at about 550 miles per hour, they follow valleys and ridgelines to stay below radar coverage. Minutes later, the bunkers vanish in a chain of precision fireballs. At 3:12 a.m., the surface battle looks decided. The Gulf is filled with burning debris, but beneath the water, a final danger emerges. Iran had expected its digital networks to be degraded early, so it prepared a mechanical backup buried on the seafloor, disconnected from any system that could be electronically penetrated. It is a dead man's trigger. Sonar suddenly reports high-speed underwater contacts. These are Hoot supercavitating torpedoes, launched from pre-positioned submerged capsules activated by the heat and disturbance of the Ford Group's defensive fire. Moving inside bubbles of gas, they behave less like traditional torpedoes and more like underwater missiles, racing forward at about 230 miles per hour. The Ford now has 42 seconds. The Churchill reacts instantly, launching a RUM-139 VLASROC. The weapon arcs into the sky, carrying a Mark 54 torpedo, drops into the water 3 miles away, activates its own sonar, and intercepts one incoming Hoot in a towering plume of white water. But 2 more are still running in, and then the Iranian coast makes one last attempt. A concealed battery of Khalij Far's anti-ship ballistic missiles, hidden in a camouflaged cave the B-21 had not detected, fires toward the carrier group. These missiles climb high, arc back down, and race in at roughly Mach 3. Now the Ford is fighting in every dimension at once. For close defense, the ship launches rolling airframe missiles, while more SM-6 interceptors rise to meet the ballistic threats in their terminal phase. Above the carrier, the intercepts land with violent concussive force, rattling the ship's superstructure. Below the surface, the Churchill's final anti-torpedo countermeasure detonates and stops the last Hoot just 400 yards from the Ford's hull. Iran's final surge is fierce, mechanical, and desperate. But the American system does not collapse. It adapts, layers defenses, and keeps processing faster than the threat can evolve. By 4:30 a.m., the Persian Gulf is quiet except for the sound of the Ford's catapults launching patrol aircraft into the first light of dawn. The Wolfpack is gone. The minefield is neutralized. The coastal staging areas are wrecked. The once protected enrichment site is buried under its own shattered mountain. The strategic consequences for Tehran are enormous. In a single morning, years of investment in anti-access and area denial doctrine have been torn apart. The Natanz complex, protected by layers of rock once thought sufficient to guarantee survival, has become a subterranean graveyard for the centrifuges that formed one of Iran's most valuable sources of leverage. The financial imbalance is just as striking. Iran loses an estimated $1.2 to $2 billion in advanced naval assets, multiple command nodes, and a significant share of its cruise missile inventory. The U.S., by contrast, spends roughly $190 million in precision weapons. That is an enormous figure for one operation, yet still small compared with the scale of global trade protected by keeping the Strait open. So why does the US win this type of engagement so decisively? Not because it has the biggest platform, not because it fires the most missiles. It wins because it dominates the speed of information. In modern conflict, the most valuable asset is not steel, explosives, or even range. It is the ability to see first, understand first, and act first. While Iranian commanders are still trying to relay orders over disrupted communications, the B-21 and the Ford's connected sensor network have already interpreted the battlefield and turned the enemy's own systems against them. That is the real difference. Iran sees a carrier. The United States sees a node in a much larger web. Iran focuses on individual platforms. The U.S. fights as a system of systems where bombers, fighters, destroyers, submarines, satellites, cyber tools, and unmanned vehicles all feed one another in real time. That is what makes this so overwhelming. The bunkers are reduced to rubble. The swarm is erased. The Tomahawks have already completed their long-range strike on the IRGC naval docks. And to outside observers, the entire sequence looks almost unbelievable. For the crews of the Fifth Fleet, it is simply the result of training, integration, and technology working exactly as designed. What stands out most in this chain of events? The B-21's ability to turn a minefield into a liability for the side that deployed it, or the raw force of a GBU-57 driving through a mountain facility? Share your thoughts below. We always watch for the sharpest tactical analysis. And if you want more deep dives into the systems, technology, and strategy shaping modern military power, stay with the channel for the next breakdown.